What's the good word, everyone? Welcome into Chatterbox Bearcats. Chuck Walter with you. Very special guest today. It is Mo Egger of 700 WLW, ESPN 1530, the producer of all UC broadcasts. You can hear him on the call from time to time when Dan Horde's voice is a little too hoarse after all the double duties that he's been pulling. Mo Egger, nice enough to join us today. This is Chatterbox Bearcats. You can find the show wherever you get your audio podcasts and on YouTube. You were sitting courtside at the Xavier game, man, and I see you on the tube quite a bit when I'm watching these games. Hey, it's Mo. Look at him down there.
Yeah.
Looking good, first of all. Secondly, you looked very scared. Take me through some of the moments of that game. I mean, you look tense, man. Take me through some of the moments down the stretch when the Bearcats were down 7 with, 7 minutes to go. It was kind of, we've seen that story before. Were you expecting them to pull out that game, or you would internally accept a defeat?
I had not accepted defeat. I was trying to come up with, like, what's the take going to be, right? Like, what angle are we going to have on this game beyond the obvious, which is Wes Miller's now 0-4 against Xavier. It's funny you say that, because I know a lot of folks who went to the game, including some that I hung out with afterward, who said to me, like watching you during the game was as entertaining as the game itself. And it's not like I can jump around, so I was kind of going through a crisis starting at halftime, because the end of the first half was sort of a microcosm of the series, the UC Xavier series, where UC had a missed dunk, a wide open three they missed, a tip ball, and then Zach Fremantle comes down and calmly drains a three. And after a first half in which the Bearcats led most of the way, suddenly they're losing. Like, it felt like the quintessential crosstown shootout moment from a Bearcat perspective. It was nerve-wracking. Look, that game is nerve-wracking. And, there for me, it's tough, because I was kind of trying to do both, right? I was thinking about it from the standpoint of, like, all right, what's the angle going to be on Monday? But also the fan in me that was like, and I can't believe they're going to lose this game again, right? And that's no knock on Xavier, man. I mean, I go out of my way, and UC fans get pissed off at me for doing so. I had no issue with Xavier basketball. I got no problem with Sean Miller. Like, the folks there are very, very good to me. I think in large part because I'm transparent with regards to who I root for. But I'm sitting there going, like, this is going to be miserable. And so I'll be honest with you, I couldn't really watch the final 5 to 7 minutes through any sort of analytical, logical lens. It was purely based on emotion. It was purely like, can they score one more point than Xavier? Can they finish off this comeback? How's it going to go against them? What weird thing is going to conspire to work against the Bearcats? And how's this going to ruin the rest of my Saturday if they don't win? It was a roller coaster, but ultimately one that, from my perspective, and I think for most of your viewers' perspective, it had the outcome we were looking for.
It was so sweet, man. It felt like a movie in there. I can name 3 atmospheres that stick out above the rest, games that I've gone to. Xavier in 2017, where Copain hit the shot. I mean, that was just an electric factory. Louisville in 2012, I believe it was, where I still have the picture as the background on my desktop. I should probably change it at this point, considering it was 12 years ago. But it's like Jeremiah Davis on a table with Sean Kilpatrick and Justin Jackson. It was a blackout game. You remember that one. That Louisville team with Shane Bohannon, I think, ended up heading to the Final Four. They may have won that title. And then Houston in 2020, the Zach Harvey game. I was sitting courtside for that one. That one was elite. Where did this one rank in terms of electric meter?
Well, at the end, very near the top. But it was interesting. Fremantle hit the shot at halftime, or going into halftime, and then, like, nothing happened during halftime. There was, I don't know if they forgot to book halftime entertainment, or if the halftime entertainment no-showed, or if they canceled it. Yeah, I mean, so we all just kind of sat there staring at the floor. I'm doing my thing on the air, reading scores and stuff like that, and I'm kind of looking around going, like, God, this place is dead. And, it was a great atmosphere, but it was an atmosphere you could feel. And from the start of the second half until UC tied it, you could feel the tension and you could feel the nervousness and you could feel the dread. Like, people talk about great atmospheres. That's not just loud and everybody's cheering. It's a vibe you can feel, man. And you could feel it in that building. This sense of, boy, they may lose to this team. They may lose this game again. And you know how it is. When UC loses to Xavier at home, it almost counts as 2 because you kind of assume, well, next year they're not going to win at the Cintas Center. So it really was unique from that perspective. I've been to, hundreds of games in that building, and I don't recall a game from an atmosphere standpoint like that, where for much of it, this sense of dread and foreboding hung in the air. And then when they came back and tied it, I was sitting across the court. I saw Corey Blunt get up, and he's like, waving people on. And it was almost like, hey, guys, it's not over. We're tied. Like, we could win this game. In fact, now we probably should win this game. I've been in that building for a lot of loud environments. I've been in that building for a lot of environments where, the place was, through the roof from the opening tip. I haven't really experienced anything from an environment standpoint. Like, I'll tell you what I'll equate it to from a football perspective was the 2021 American Athletic Conference championship game when they played Houston. Because, they win and they're in, but it felt like, God, the most Cincinnati thing ever is Baylor won, so all the Bearcats have to do is win, and now they're going to lose, and it was a 1-point game at halftime. And there was this real sort of tangible sense at halftime, like, God, they can't blow this, can they? Like, it would be the most Cincinnati thing ever to blow this, and they didn't. It was awesome. And the same thing happened on Saturday. That, to me, is what made that atmosphere and that game unique. And when you mentioned this year's Skyline Chili Crosstown Shootout 10, 15 years from now, I'll remember some of the plays, but I'll remember the slow dip in energy, the sense of dread, the intensity in the building, and then the slow climb back to the fervent atmosphere that we all enjoyed over the final 3 or 4 minutes of gameplay.
It's hysterical that you say that a 7-point game with 7 minutes to go in the game, and we've just been hurt so many times, Mo. You and I and the other 12,012 fans in that arena, actually standing room only. I don't know what the final number was, but we've been hurt so many times that we had just accepted defeat, and that's kind of hysterical that Corey Blunt had to get him up in a tie game. I don't know if that was hyperbole or if it was seriously a tie game, and he was like, "Come on, guys, it's tied. Let's go." Dan's about to make a bucket to give us the lead.
In the first half, they showed Kenyon Martin, and the place goes nuts. And a buddy of mine texted me midway through the second half and said, "Can they show Kenyon again?" Because it kind of felt like nothing could wake the crowd. And like Xavier was ahead, but they weren't pulling away. I did something during that stretch that I never do. I never do this. If you're looking at ESPN's Gamecast, it'll tell you in real time what the win probability is. I never look at that. I have no interest.
Hope you didn't look at it against Nevada.
No, I know what it was, but no. But when UC was down by 7, I glanced at it just to see, like, all right, mathematically, how improbable is this? Because on one hand, down 7 to go, like, dude, you can make that up in a minute. You can make that up in 3 possessions. No big deal. At the same time, in that particular game, it felt like a mountain. Like, I called it to friends of mine after the game. I'm like, what a comeback. And, it sounds silly, like down 7 to go. Big deal. That happens, every night in college basketball. That felt like more than 7. It felt like conquering the deficit, the history of the rivalry, karma, whatever. It felt like more than overcoming a 7-point deficit. So I was curious, like, all right, mathematically, statistically, which removes all emotion, doesn't care about history, doesn't care about 5 straight, doesn't care about what UC's record against Xavier is over the last 25, 27, 28 years. Statistically, what are the odds that Xavier is going to win this game? And I don't think in that stretch that it climbed above 55 or 56%. So I started to cling to that. Like, all right, well, the computer says it's not a 50-50 chance, but they do have a chance. And then when UC took the lead, I quickly closed that tab because I didn't want to see what the probability of the Bearcats winning was.
How were they able to win it? Because you look at Jizzle James going 0 for 11. You look at Seamoss's sluggish start, and I know he finished the game pretty hot. Dan Skillings, when it was all said and done, played pretty well the last 8 minutes, the last couple TV timeouts of the game. Day-Day, Aziz, Connor Hickman gave them massive minutes that would not have allowed Cincinnati to even really be in the game had they not given those really good minutes. But is there one player, is there one play that kind of changed everything? I look at the Fremantle missed dunk is kind of like the one bounce that Cincinnati never gets in this series. They got that bounce in terms of him getting stuffed by the rim and then Seamoss immediately going down and hitting the floater.
Yeah, I mean, the obvious one for me is the Skillings putback, which, call it what it is, he left early by his own admission. But that was the first time that I said to myself, they're going to win this game. I mean, that's the first time that I said to myself, like, all right, they're in the driver's seat. They now should win this game. For me, the answer is Xavier ran out of gas. And that's not to take anything away from UC. Look, I agree with everything that Wes Miller had to say about, like, to win a game like that, take some big ones where you've got guys who don't shoot it well. You miss a ton of layups. Your half-court offense totally falls apart. And yet you find a way to win. I thought Cincinnati's, I think UC defensively is underrated. Like they get after it defensively. They're not perfect by any stretch, but I thought that combined with Xavier just kind of running out of gas and UC to a degree taking them out of their offense. I thought that's why they won the game. If I were to boil it down to one thing, but I also think the better team did win. Now they're not flawless and they have to play better. And, the cool thing about that was they did win a game like that in which they played poorly, but objectively speaking, I think UC is the better team. And that's with Xavier having Zach Fremantle have a terrific first half. But yeah, I think if you wanted to talk about like one play that maybe swung things in one direction, the Fremantle dunk, there was a bucket by Lukosius in there, I guess, right after the missed dunk that kind of felt like it got the crowd going again. Jizzle's 2 free throws, which, good for him at the end of an 0 for 11 night. I'll say this about him, man. His body language never changed. You never looked at him and saw frustration. You never looked at him and saw a guy who was hanging his head. He looked like a dude that, all right, next play. And when it was time for the next play to make 2 free throws, he made them. And oftentimes, as UC fans, we know how some of the free throw challenge teams that we've watched have done at that line in that situation. He made them, which is a credit to him.
One of the things the Bearcats aren't challenged in this season is putting the ball in the basket via the dunk. The Dunkin Bearcats, who Danny and I have called, and we'd love to get a Dunkin sponsorship. If any of our listeners own a small franchise and want to support the show, we'd absolutely love it. But man, there were some teams back in the day, Hicks, Maxiel, James White. I mean, you saw a lot of dunks. Kenyon Martin and DeMarc Johnson on the same team, Kenyon Martin and Mel Levitt on the same team. What those teams didn't have, correct me if I'm wrong, they didn't have leaping point guards like a Jizzle James or a Day-Day Thomas who literally on the break can cram it in your face. Is this the greatest Bearcats dunking team you've ever seen?
Might be. Yeah. Because when you think a lot of those dunkers you just talked about, you think of them in transition or off misses, right? Like Melvin Levitt's 2 most iconic dunks. One is off a miss against Alcorn State. The other is, it's on a set play against Duke, but it's on the run. Like you think of James White in transition. What UC has gotten good at when they play Georgia Tech. I was lucky enough to call that game because football was playing on the same day. When UC played Georgia Tech, it was I saw a defense do something I had never seen before, which was we're going to let UC's guards penetrate because we have to stop the lob pass. So like Jizzle James, Connor Hickman, Day-Day Thomas would get into the paint and their defenders would back off because of the lob. You don't see that in the half court. And so I think it might be the best dunking team because of the dunking ability of some of the guys in the backcourt, but also how they can get to the rim and how they can throw lobs and how they can throw it down in the half court. Now, the flip side of that, and I've talked about this all week, that can't be the bread and butter of your half court offense. It could be a component, but again, Xavier in the half court, if it wasn't a lob, if it wasn't an alley-oop, they didn't score. That's got to change. But yeah, because of the dunks aren't limited to fast breaks and putbacks, and they have so many guys they can throw it up to. And they've got guys who, if they beat you, can get there and throw it down. It very well may be the greatest dunking team. And by the way, the gap between them and team number 2 might not be very wide.
So 2017, 2018, if you want to make one comparison between this year's team and that year's team, it was that there are, different guys you can point at as being the most important, the best player. I think a stock answer would maybe be Gary Clark, but you can make a very serious debate for Jacob Evans. Cumberland, probably not the best player, but you saw how important he was when he went off the floor against Nevada in the NCAA tournament. This year's team feels the same. It feels like there are a bunch of different guys that can beat you on any given night. You're not really going to say Dylan Mitchell's the best player on the team, but he's damn near one of the most important. Let's start there. Let's do a double-barreled question, because my talent coach in this industry said never do a double-barreled question. So I'm going to stick it right to her and say we're going to do a double-barreled question. First of all, who's the best player on this team? Secondly, is this team better than 17-18?
First of all, I need a talent coach. Can you put me in touch with her?
It didn't work. I'm in sales.
Well, I hear you. I hold that 17-18 team in really high esteem. That was a number 2 seed in the NCAA tournament. And I hate that it gets remembered for 10 bad minutes against Nevada and not for what it did during the regular season or what it did in the conference tournament and how good they were. And, they played all their home games at NKU and how beloved a player Gary Clark became and how good of a player Jacob Evans was. And that was a really well-rounded team, and it was the culmination of years building toward that, and it was supposed to result in a deeper postseason run and didn't. But the fact that they had bad 10 minutes against Nevada doesn't take away from, at least for me, how much I love that team. So I am not quite prepared to say after a month, 6 weeks, whatever it's been, 10 games, that this team is as good. But I'll at least entertain the possibility. I need to see him play better teams. I'm not sure how good Xavier is, quite frankly. And now those questions get amplified because of the Fremantle injury. I think we're going to find out a lot about him on Friday night because Dayton's good. And Dayton takes care of the ball. The thing about that 18 team was you couldn't go on a 10-0 run against them. I guess Nevada could. Forget that for a second. You couldn't go on a 10-0 run against them because, number one, they were just so damn good defensively. Number two, somebody would get a bucket. Maybe it would be Jaron. Maybe it would be Jacob Evans. Maybe it would be Gary Clark. Maybe it would be Kyle Washington. Kane Broome. Yeah, you couldn't go on a 10-12 run against them. And I think it's going to be hard to do that against this team. Now, I'm still not entirely sure, who's going to be in a situation similar to Saturday on the road in the Big 12 against a good team. They're down 4 to go. Who's getting you buckets? By the way, the answer last year was, in many cases, Simas Lukosius. So maybe it's him again this year. Maybe they just have more options. I just need to see him against better competition. I have no issue with their scheduling intent. Look, they've played in 3 true road games. They're going to play a neutral site game against a ranked team, 2 Big East opponents. Could it be better? Sure, but they took themselves out of their home arena and they played some high major competition, but they just haven't played good competition yet. And again, I'm sure there's a Xavier fan who's going to hear that and go, oh, what the hell? I don't know how good the Musketeers are. They may prove to be awesome, and if so, UC gets an awesome win. I don't think that team is great. I need to see this one against a good opponent, figure out a way to beat them, before I put them in the conversation with the 18 team. But that statement is more a reflection of how good that 18 team was and how much I loved it in real time and love it 6.5 years later.
Dayton team is definitely good. Let's discuss that for a little bit. We have one thing in common, Mo. We are two diehard fans of Bearcat basketball that are not alums of the school. Myself, Ohio University, you, the University of Dayton. Now, I can't tell you anything about OU basketball. Like, I went there for the journalism degree, not for the convocation center. Although the convo, the best fans in the MAC, I'll tell you that much.
Yeah,
but
sure.
I'm Bearcats through and through. You're Bearcats through and through as well. But you do, from what at least I've seen surface level, follow the Flyers more than here and there. So you're the perfect person to have on for the breakdown. Tell me, how good is this Flyers team, and where's the matchup nightmare going to be for Cincinnati?
The matchup nightmare is going to be Dayton doesn't turn it over. I think as of you and I doing this, they are still number 1 in the country in fewest turnovers per game and in the top 10 in fewest turnovers per possession. So if you're going to stop them defensively, you either have to figure out a way to turn a team over that takes really good care of the basketball, or you have to force them into missed shots. Now, when that happened against North Carolina in the second half, Tar Heels come back after being down 21. Iowa State came back against them against Maui. When they're not turning it over and they're getting to the rim and their guards are controlling the game, they're really hard to beat. They're not a great defensive team. I think was evident by what happened to them against Carolina and Iowa State. When they needed a stop, they couldn't get one. And they're not the deepest team ever. Posh Alexander has given them some really good minutes off the bench, but they have 4 or 5 guys who could score. They take the thing that stands out to me more than any is they take really good care of the ball. And I thought they were going to get destroyed by UConn, and they blew them out. I thought they were going to run out of gas. 3rd game in as many days. Had just lost 2 heartbreakers, and then you're playing the defending national champs who had also lost the previous 2 games. And Dayton took it to them and pulled away in the second half. And that showed me something, as silly as it might sound, about the team's mental toughness and ability to bounce back. They were down 12 early against a really good Marquette team, stormed all the way back. They got stops when they needed to, but they can control the game in the backcourt. These are 2 teams that I think are both in the top 20 in fewest turnovers per possession. So I'm interested in who can turn the other over, because when the Bearcats have been at their best, they take really good care of the ball, and Dayton's done that well all season long.
Wes Miller definitely alleviated, and look, there was no internal pressure, right? It was external. Like there's no way that Cincinnati, with all Wes Miller's already done on the recruiting trail, and just the leader that he is for the program, there's no way they're even looking ahead to the future. But fans, are sitting there saying, hey, if he can't beat Xavier, if he can't start winning some of these big games, we're getting a little nervous as a fan base. He takes that away. One thing he has not done yet, dating back to his win against Illinois, where after he followed with a loss against Arkansas, he has not really followed up a big win with another top 75 win. He just hasn't. If you look at his win against BYU last year, it was immediately followed by an L. If you look at Texas Tech, immediately followed by a loss. He's yet to really put together that streak. That I look at Huggins' 01-02 team, I believe it was, where they rattled off like 16 in a row before losing to Marquette after losing to Oklahoma State earlier in the year. And I'm hoping that that's this team right here, that they lost a little road game at the beginning of the year to Villanova, and now they rattle off some wins. I mean, how big is this Dayton game right now? Forget just a quad 1 win in terms of West fully, getting over the hump and winning some of these big games. Is it huge, or is it just another quad 1 game on the schedule among many?
I think it's big for a few different reasons. I mean, look, Wes has his record that he has in these sorts of games because he hasn't had very good teams. So very good teams typically don't win consecutive games against quality opposition. We view this team as different. And all along it's been, well, we're going to judge Wes by how he does when he has a good team. He's got a good team. He's got an NCAA tournament team. He's got a team that I think can at least finish in the top half of the Big 12. So I think you're judged as a coach by how you do when you've got the program on solid footing and when you have your guys and when you have a team that you're prepared to put your hands on your hips and say, all right, we're attacking everybody with this bunch. Well, if you take that team and can't win big games like this, then we hold it against you as a coach. I think Wes would be the first to admit that. But look, man, it's one thing to make the NCAA tournament. It's something else to barely make the NCAA tournament. And so I've thought about this a lot, like what are we going to be doing in February and March? Are we going to be checking every bracketology site there is, seeing if they're among the first 4 in, last 4 out, last 4 with a bye? Or are we going to be wondering, God, what can their seed be? The way you do that is you win a lot of games early so you don't have to make up ground late. You stack Q1 wins. And so I view this as a golden opportunity to start building the resume. Start building the resume. And if it doesn't happen Friday, okay, there's time to recover. But when are they going to start building the resume? Like when we talk about how like this is the year they've got to get to the tournament. Okay, well, you got to start building the resume. I also think, this game is going to determine how we view the entire non-conference schedule. They do have a game against Grambling State on Sunday, but I think if they beat Dayton on a neutral floor, we'll go, okay, Villanova was a bad night on the road, tough place to play, Big East team, happens. I think if they lose to Dayton, there's going to be a real sense of unfulfillment. Now, what is that going to do for how people talk about Wes Miller? I don't know. They're going to, you and I both know there are people who are going to lose their minds as soon as he loses his next game, whether that's Friday or in mid-February. But I view this game mainly through the lens of resumes. Build a resume. Let's go, because this league is going to be really hard. There are losses to come. There are probably home losses to come. You got to start stacking wins against really, really good teams. Oh, and by the way, as somebody who cares about both programs but badly wants Cincinnati to beat Dayton, you lost to them last year. You can make up for it this season by knocking off a good team on a neutral floor.
Cats fans show up when the team's good. It's in any sport. You saw it at Notre Dame in football. I remember going up to Indianapolis for that Butler game. There was a lot of red in the arena there. It's just what they do. Last year, the team was so-so, but heading into the Dayton game, they were supposed to be pretty good. The Flyers outnumbered UC fans at Heritage Bank. Per our boots on the ground, Hudson Klauke. What about this year? Is that something that's going to happen again? If so, unacceptable, right, Mo?
Well, sure. I mean, I know Dayton fans who live in Cincinnati who aren't going to drive an hour to UD Arena, so this was their chance to go see them both last year and this year, so they're going to go. I know Dayton fans. This year was different because they did have Marquette at home, an elite team, but would say, like, I could spend money on tickets to a bunch of Atlantic 10 games and see Fordham and LaSalle and St. Bonaventure, or I could go watch and play the Bearcats downtown, and if you live in Cincinnati, a little bit closer to home. So I have felt like the game itself has had more appeal to Dayton fans than UC fans. And I say that because since we found out these two teams are going to play, when I talk to UC fans, I get an eye roll. When I talk to Dayton fans, there's excitement about, yeah, cool, let's go and do it. By the way, Dayton's got a great history in that arena. They've beaten Louisville, they've beaten Kentucky, so that's a place of fond memories. That said, this year's UC team is better than last year's team was. Last year's game was on the same day as a Bengals game. That is perhaps a factor. They are coming off a victory against Xavier. Last year, they played Dayton the week after Xavier. They lost to Xavier, so there was no, sort of post-shootout surge. So I expect it. Look, Dayton's going to have a lot of people there. Last year, I thought it was 65-35 or 70-30 in favor of Dayton. I think this year it's going to be close to 50-50. But I have felt like in the case of both games, there are a lot of Dayton fans who have viewed this game with enthusiasm, where there are Bearcat fans who are like, why do we have to go down there? Why aren't we playing this game in our building? And so I think that is kind of cut into the already built-in enthusiasm for Bearcat basketball. But I do know this for a fact because I had the guy on the air who's putting together this event that after Saturday, there was a huge spike in ticket sales after UC beat Xavier and after Dayton beat Marquette. And I think Dayton beating Marquette helped sell tickets to UC fans who now understand I'm going to go watch a game between two ranked teams. And so I think the atmosphere is going to be awesome. And last year it was good, but I think it was tilted in favor of one school. I'm not sure that's going to be the case this year.
Love it. That's Mo Egger. You can hear him on 700 WLW, ESPN 1530. Just a voice that's synonymous with Cincinnati sports talk. It's not even close. Best in the tri-state. If you haven't checked him out, be sure to do it. I definitely knew what stations he was on before the show today when we were talking. Mo, good stuff, and best of luck in the struggle for the steak, man.
I need a point this week. By the way, if your viewers were watching, wondering what I was doing before, I was about to lose power on my laptop. So it looked like I was shooing a cat off my feet or something. That's
Saved by the bell. Saved by the bell.
I want to be totally unprepared and have the thing go out. So we're good. Charlie, thank you for having me. Do it again, man.
Absolutely. See you, Mo.